Hi, this is Scott Howard, and we have another edition of the Hypro Factory Side podcast. Today's discussion will be on diesel fuel filtration. Joining me today is Jim Simonton. Jim, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, yeah, I've been working on diesel filtration for roughly 10 years now. Uh, kind of started out uh, working for Donaldson and now work with stationary hydraulics within the Hypro Donaldson group and uh, have been noticing over the last 6 or 8 months that the price of diesel has gone crazy, and which leads me to believe that there's going to be some maintenance issues that are going to go by the wayside. And I think it would be good to have a really solid discussion about why diesel needs to continue to be filtered just to protect the investment of the engines involved.
Well, that's super. That's a really good topic right now. I think with supply chain issues, with components, we want to make sure that the components are kept clean and dry so that repairs are minimized for that reason as well. So I think this is very timely for this topic. Let's start off with a question. Why filter diesel fuel anyway? What is the benefit?
Well, the benefit is that a typical injector on a high pressure common rail engine can run upwards of $6,000. They have very tight tolerances, and quite frankly, diesel is notoriously dirty. The weird thing is the standards from the U.S. government have not changed since the 1940s. If you were to put diesel in a little glass jar and hold it up to the sun, if you can see through the fuel clearly, that passes the government standards. And a lot of people really think that that's what's going on. However, as we know in the filtration world, it's what you can't see that really does the damage. And like I said, the tolerances on these injectors are less than a micron in a lot of cases, and or certainly 1 to 2 microns for sure. And these so keeping the contaminant out of the diesel is is imperative. We've noticed that the fuel suppliers, uh, they kind of go with the government standards for the most part. Some of them are better than others, and actually do take it a little more seriously and try and keep their ISO codes down. But for the most part, we see ISO codes of around 21, 20, 18 as being fairly typical. And these engines really need an ISO code of around 14, 13, 11 or better. So we try and educate our customers as to how to best get to.
Well, you hear the statement, "There's no dirt in my diesel fuel."
I hear that, and my first reaction is let's take a sample and let's put it under a microscope and let's see what we've actually got. Uh, Generally speaking, they're somewhat shocked at at what their diesel actually looks like. An analogy that I like to use with my customers is if your diesel looks like a Pizza Hut Super Supreme, we really want to try and get that as close to a cheese pizza as we can. If we can get it down to looking like a cheese, you're not going to have very many injector issues.
I like that analogy. Everybody can relate to food.
Yep.
That's good. You also mentioned that there's a possibility of water being in diesel. Is that something that's fairly common and something we should address on a regular basis?
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, and a lot of people they see water at the bottom of their tanks. They don't know how it really gets there. Generally, in humid climates, on like in the southeast of the U.S., you just have basic humidity issues, and then out west where it's a little drier, we get the wild temperature swings of 35, 40 degrees a day, and if you have a tank sitting out in the sun and it's 95 degrees during the day, and then at night it gets down to 55. Um, at some point, you're going to get that dew point met frequently, and that's just water that gets into the fuel, and sometimes it mixes in, sometimes it drops to the bottom. But water in diesel is not very good for the injectors because water molecules are fairly big, and they need to get they need to be taken care of as easily as possible.
And it's going to reduce the efficiency of the diesel engine as well. So,
Absolutely. So,
so on these applications, where would you recommend that we put dirt and water absorbing filtration as far as inline in the process?
well, it's interesting. There's lots of places where we can put it. There are filters out there that are quite good at dropping. I know we've got filters that can drop down to they can pull 3 or 4 ISO codes down and get you into spec uh, just right at the pump, and we can add a water absorbing filter right there as well. That is a if somebody's really budget minded and that's the only thing that they can do, that is a very it's not efficient, but it's a good way of at least doing something to protect that engine. But the reality is the best way to handle it is to filter it coming off the truck, going into the storage tank, and then making sure within that storage tank that you protect it by not allowing that water to form using either a coalescer or some sort of a kidney loop with some water absorbing material in that as well. And also having proper breathers in there to keep the dust out. People forget that these tanks breathe, and it does not. It doesn't take a whole lot of dust to actually ruin diesel. I was in a class some years ago at a NORIA conference, and it, it literally the guy used an analogy of if you took an aspirin and crushed it into 200 little into as fine a powder as you can make it, and then divide that powder up into about 200 little tiny piles, and you put one of those little tiny piles into what would be, in effect be a 20-ounce bottle of soda, pretend it was filled with diesel, that would get you an ISO code of around 21, 2018. It does not take very much contaminant to ruin a piece of equipment. Uh, so imagine that type of contaminant over 10,000 gallons of fuel or 8,000 gallons of fuel. Uh, as that tank breeze is pulling in a lot of dust, and an analogy I like to use in my seminars is if you don't think a 3 micron piece of dust can't ruin something, please go look at your windshield. Every pockmark on your windshield is a 3 micron piece of dust hitting it at 100 miles an hour. You get enough pockmarks, you get a crack, eventually you're going to have to replace that windshield. And it's an analogy that I think people really understand that the same thing is going on in their system now that they know that dust is in there, um, and they take it a little bit more seriously to make an effort to keep it clean.
That's some good information. Appreciate that, Jim. So let me focus on the nozzle. Let's say your customer is not in a position to add any offline filtration to the bulk tank, and you're looking at adding some filtration at the nozzle whenever the piece of mobile equipment is being filled with diesel fuel. Uh, how do you determine the media grade of filtration and whether you will need one or multiple filters in series to make sure that when the diesel fuel is being filled up, it's addressing the contamination levels properly?
Well, it all depends on the flow rate. If it's your standard car type diesel pump at 30 gallons a minute, generally one filter with a water absorbing filter in front of it would be sufficient. Uh, if it's like say it's a truck stop type thing where they're flowing at 130 gallons a minute, then we'd probably put 3 filters in series because each one of them can handle about 50 gallons a minute flowing through it. So we want to make sure we have enough to handle all of it, plus a little bit of room just in case for pressure and things like that. So you always want to kind of go one more than you really need. Uh, is sort of the rule that I look at, or at least one more than you really need. Sometimes, if you got a lot of gallonage going through it, maybe we add 2 or 3. extra filters just to uh, extend the life of the filters a little bit.
So let's say
Um,
this is an application where you do need to add multiple filters. Do you step it down in filtration, or do you use a very tight filter in multiple housings? What's your thoughts on that?
in reality, what I have always done is it kind of depends on the time of the year. If we're using a less than, I generally recommend in most parts of the country in from April through mid-November when temperatures are pretty good, a less than 4 micron filter. And I say less than 4 micron specifically in that a lot of particle counters cannot see anything less than 4 micron, therefore it won't be counted. So less than 4 micron down to, a lot of filters are down to 1 micron now. Uh, but but I wouldn't go too tight because there are some additive packages. And then from November to April, I do kind of recommend either a 6 or a 7 micron filter because some of the ad packs um, are are pretty big in some of their molecular structures. Plus, it attracts a little bit of water as well in the colder months. So you want to be able to have a good flow going through it, and you're still getting even in that 6 micron range, you're still getting about 98% of what you would at under 4. Uh, and it just solves a little bit of issues that can pop up um, during the colder months. But if a fuel is blended properly, the ad pack should be submicronic and should flow through. But I've had enough experience over the last 10 years to know that some refinery somewhere will create a batch of fuel that is just beyond horrible. So, and that's another reason why you need the filters there, because again that one refinery somewhere in the country that just ruins everything. We've seen people burn through hundreds of filters in a week uh, because the fuel is just that bad. And but it's every one of those filters protected every engine that filled up through it.
Well, that's really good information. So initially, what we learned is it has to do with flow rate. So you're going to size the filter housing based on the flow rate. What other components like gauges? What are the ways that your customer will be able to tell whenever the dirt filter and the water absorbing filter is ready to be changed?
Well, the mainly every filter should have a pressure gauge on it. And the first thing you want to do is you want to learn when it's a brand new filter is you want to see what that pressure drop is. So as you're pumping through it initially, you want to see where that pressure actually is, and then um, you figure out uh, what kind of tolerance do I have? How soon do I want to filter these things? And you want to talk to your rep, your filter rep about what's the maximum pressure drop that I should have before I change these things. And sometimes it's 25 psi and sometimes it's 50 psi, but you kind of add up as it gets into that range um, to uh, to determine where it is the correct spot to change the filter without wasting filters, so to speak. Um,
And also the pump output capabilities may dictate that as well as far
yes,
as the DP setting. So if
yep,
it's a low pressure that the pump can't overcome, maybe we even oversize the housing a little bit more
yep,
since we know
absolutely,
we're dealing with lower pressures.
absolutely. So
If you have a customer that says, "Hey, when this expires, I don't want to have to shut down the system in order to change the filter," can you make a custom unit to where you have like two lines, one in standby that you can bring online so the customer has time to change the filter without shutting down, filling up mobile equipment?
actually, I think we do now have that capability. Using some of the capabilities of the plant in Anderson, Indiana, I think we have that capability to do sort of duplex type housings now. Um, Generally speaking, if you're talking to spin on a filter can be changed in, even if it's 5 filters, it shouldn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes to change those out. Uh, but there are, situations where people, it's there's a lot of things moving at the same time, and having that ability to uh, switch your filter office, your filtration side, and then moving back as the other filters get changed, that those will work. But again, you got to kind of pay attention, because I've seen workers, they switch it and then suddenly they got to change a whole bunch of filters, and it's that uh, least path of resistance that a lot of places have. So you got to kind of keep that in mind as well. Is it easier to change 10 filters or five or even two? Uh, all depends on the situation of the customer.
Oh, that's really great. So we have custom capabilities for their application. We definitely need to look at the flow rate to make sure that it starts with a low differential pressure, and then that'll also dictate indication as far as what the capabilities are of the pump. But we have solutions for mobile equipment as far as diesel fuel. And the two things, just to summarize, is dirt and water. The diesel fuel is very expensive now, but also the components as far as replacing or repairing the engine are very expensive now, and with supply chain issues. It may be a little while before components are received or the repairs can occur. So it seems like right now is a very good time to focus on filtration on the diesel fuel.
Yeah, just absolutely take the proactive stance and protect your equipment. As it was one of the first things I always mentioned in my seminars, is that if you take a filter down to its most basic level, in the end it is insurance, and it's the cheapest insurance you're ever going to buy.
That's a really good summary. Well, Jim, I really appreciate the time. It's very good information. I think right now is a very good time to focus on contamination control of diesel fuel, and we have the tools for you. So thank you very much for sitting in on this factory side podcast on diesel fuel filtration. Please come visit HiPro on our social media locations on Twitter, on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Thank you again.
Thank you.